Welcome to the 8th annual field report of Badlands Dinosaur Museum at Dickinson Museum Centre. We've been doing these for a few years now, and it's nice to get to show off a lot of our fossils. If you are local and you're watching this, if you're watching it live, tomorrow is our open day for Christmas, so I'll have a little ad for that at the end. But some of the fossils that we'll be talking about, you'll be able to come into the museum and see them tomorrow. Well, you can see them any day, of course, but we'll be actually sort of actively out there in the crowd. Okay, so before I start talking about the fossils, I always have this slide. Please consider donating at dickinsonmuseumcentre.com. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about this year is actually some really great opportunities to be involved with what we do here. So keep your eyes open on the rest of the talk. And yeah, if you're considering donating, please do. So a little outline. Do an introduction to some of the people here, and then we'll talk about some of the museum news and new exhibits and things like that. And then we'll be talking about discoveries from fieldwork. Then around 6:45, or however long it takes me to get through all my slides, we'll go to our live on-camera session. This is live, of course, as well, but you'll get to see all of us and ask us questions, and we'll show you some of the fossils that I've talked about and maybe get some things out that I completely forgot about or ran out of time. So here's the crew. You've got myself, Dr. Denver Fowler, in the top left corner. I've been here for 8 years now. That's why it's the 8th field report. My wife, Dr. Liz Friedman Fowler, she's also a dinosaur paleontologist at Dickinson State University here in town. She's an expert on duck-billed dinosaurs and histology, the growth of dinosaurs. So I ship all of that stuff over to her. Amanda in the bottom left, she's our our collections manager and educator, and she's an expert on ornithomimosaur dinosaurs, so the ostrich mimic type things. Danny in the middle at the bottom there was our intern this summer, now up in Alaska, was a Dickinson State University student. And then Steve Clawson in the bottom right is our preparator, so he runs the lab and trains new preparators, and if you come and volunteer in our lab, you'll get to work with Steve. And we have lots of volunteers in the lab, and I will say this year, absolutely, we have got space for new volunteers. So if you've always wanted to dig up or clean up dinosaur bones, get in touch, Denver Fowler at dickinsongov.com, or find us on the web, dickinsonmuseumcentre.com, or through the city's webpage, and find our volunteer pages. We have a whole bunch of great volunteers who've been, some of them volunteering with us for a few years, and we have loads of really great dinosaur bones that need cleaning up, especially the really big ones that take up a lot of room. So what's going on around Badlands Dinosaur Museum? Well, the giant elephant in the room for a little while has been the museum expansion. So this is something we're really looking forward to. You might have heard a little bit about it in the newspapers. We got a grant from the state, and I think for $1 million, which is helping fund this. So this is the first slide here that I've got. Shows kind of the early blueprint, the early preliminary sketches of what the expansion is going to look like. It looks like it's messed up my slide. That's good. Oh well. You can just imagine what that blueprint's supposed to look like. The picture in the bottom right with the red roof and the yellow roof. So the red roof is what the expansion is going to be like. The bottom end of it is going to be collections and a fossil lab. And then we're going to also add a community room and have a sort of accessory corridor and exhibit space. And most notable from the public perspective, we're going to renovate the main dinosaur exhibit hall. I hope it hasn't done this to all of my rotated slides. So this is the current collection space. Oh, that's a mess. Oh well. So it has wrecked my rotated slides. Maybe I'll re-record these in a bit. Anyway, so we have 2 small storerooms for our collection space at the moment. We have about 40 cabinets and 2 large racking spaces. But the expanded collections, which should be the kind of lightish blue in that slide, will make us about 10 times bigger. which will fit about 450 cabinets, which I already have from the USGS. They're in storage in town, and various oversized racking. So this is an example of what a collection space like this would look like. I think this is the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum in Canada. But at the bottom you can see some fossil storage cabinets and then lots of big oversized racking for the really big bones. And so here's some of those fossil storage cabinets that we got from the USGS. So the current Paleo Lab is quite small. The yellow square was on the blueprint, but it's a good space, but it's a limited space really. If you have lots of volunteers, there are times when we have 5 people in the lab and everyone's fighting for elbow room. And we only really have space for one big project at a time. So currently we have the giant Tyrannosaur concretion in the middle of the lab, and it takes up a lot of space. Yeah, so the expanded lab should be about 4 times bigger, maybe a little bit more than that. So we'll have lots of space for volunteers and able to fit in a lot more big projects at a time. So there's a little example of a lab there at the Sternberg Museum in Kansas. And our proposed lab should be bigger than that, but this is the kind of look that it will have. We'll also be renovating the exhibit. So this is currently in 3 parts, the proposed new exhibit. We've got the upper balcony, the main sandpit, and the lower walkway. That's what we currently have. So this is the upper balcony. So the plan for this is to convert this into called the Hall of Dinosaur Detectives, or as I like to call it, the Hall of Methods. So this is a introduction to how scientists find out new information about dinosaurs. So I'm not going to go through my ideas for the new exhibit too much, because this is mainly about the fieldwork, of course. But this will have hands-on activities showing the methods that we use to create that new knowledge. What we're going to do is we're going to wall off that balcony so you won't be able to see into the sandpit, and there'll be floor-to-ceiling cabinets along all the walls. So there'll be a lot more exhibit space, a lot more room to get more fossils on display. And the central areas will have these hands-on activities. The main sandpit and the lower walkway is currently what is there. This is going to be the Hall of Dinosaur Paleobiology. So we're going to take all those methods we just learned about and apply them and see the examples in all the wonderful fossils that we've been collecting and that we have in our collections here. So we're going to take out that sandpit. We're going to take down that wall. I was going to make a Ronald Reagan joke, but I don't feel like it right now. And we're going to open the room up basically so you can walk around these dinosaurs. It's really dynamic when you can get around these skeletons. So that's what we're going to do. And there'll be floor-to-ceiling cabinets along those walls as well. So again, massively increasing the amount of space that we can display fossils. I think one thing when you walk into our exhibit hall, you just notice how bare the walls are. Like there's these big brown walls. I often say we're the brownest building in Dickinson. And that wall space should be covered in fossils. So we're going to turn it into that and really get efficient with the use of space in the museum. Possible phase 2 is what I call the Children's Curiosity Center. So this isn't something that's planned with the current expansion, but what I would really like to do, and we'll start looking into looking for donors next year for this project, is building a Children's Curiosity Center. So this is the photograph is an example of one at the Sternberg Museum in Kansas. This one's kind of a classroom style, but I think these kinds of places where kids can come in and really unleash their curiosity. Like we have a few things like that. We have the hands-on topographic sandbox, and we also have a fantastic microscope, which I always call a curiosity generator. But these sorts of places and spaces are really great for kids to get stuck into science and learn a lot. So this one, again, like a classroom with lots of benches and books and things like that, but we'll also have lots of hands-on. We would like to build this sort of thing to have our hands-on exhibits move into that space. And my last slide in the expansion part is your name on the Hall of Dinosaur Paleobiology. So maybe if I can find a huge donor, we can maybe name the Hall of Dinosaur Paleobiology or the Hall of Methods after someone who would want to contribute to this program. We're building this hall. You know, this building is going to be built, but we really need to develop funding for the exhibits to make them as great as they can be and to really do these specimens justice. So what else is new at Badlands Dinosaur Museum? Well, we've got some new microscopes in the lab, some of which was paid for by a grant from the BLM and other things, donations. So we have lots of new microscopes for volunteers to use. Steve is very keen on everyone using microscopes when they're prepping. I'm getting into it. I really enjoy it. It makes you feel like you've done a lot when you've moved a few grains of sand. It looks like you moved massive boulders. But anyway, some great new microscopes. And we have some new things on exhibit. If you've not been in the museum recently, there's quite a lot of new things to see in the exhibit hall. So Sisyphus is the holotype, the first known specimen of Daspletosaurus wilsoni, this tyrannosaur that we've been talking about for a few years. And now you can come and see it at the museum. So we set up these 3 cases showing off what parts we have of the skeleton. So this is the skull, which is quite dramatically large. It's about 3 feet long, 4 feet long, something like that. And you can really get around it and see all the bones. The grey parts, we have those as real bones. It's just that they are from the other side of the skull. We only have the left side, so we 3D scanned them and printed them out and then stuck them on this side. But the other ones, those are real bones. Those are the real teeth sticking out of the jaws. We also have the postcrania, so we didn't get much of this skeleton, but we have some neck bones and parts of the pelvis and some ribs, so those are on display as well. And I've not got it together yet, but we have a modeler who's making us the 3D model of a life-size reconstructed skull. So Amanda 3D scanned the bones we do have, and we put those into the computer, and then the 3D modeler is filling in all the missing pieces. So this is a 3D model of the complete skull. Now it's currently just being broken up into pieces so that they can be printed out in our 3D printers and put on exhibit. So I've got about half of them. So hopefully in the new year, I'll have the complete set. I can start printing them, and then we'll have a complete full-size skull on exhibit right next to all those bones, which I am really looking forward to seeing, actually, because I was very impressed when that skull went on display. It's a lot bigger than when you just hold one of the bones in your hands. It's quite impressive. Something else, Stegosaurus. So I guess from when this museum opened in the early 1990s, we had a cast of Stegosaurus lying there in the sand. I used to tell the school kids that he was asleep and he was being guarded by this Allosaurus standing over the top. They never really believed me. But anyway, I think he was asleep. But we woke him up just recently and took him to bits. So in May of this year, we took all those bones up out of the sand pit, and we shipped them off to have a little holiday in Colorado. So this is the workshop of Chris Madsen, who's a specialist in mounting dinosaur skeletons. And you can see a little bit of the mount being put together right there in his workshop. Well, in November, Chris came back to the museum with the Stegosaur. Stegosaur doesn't have a name, can't believe it. And we started putting it together. So I let Chris and put it together, but yep, here it is being put together, and now it is mounted. So if you haven't been in, you can now see our mounted Stegosaur. Now we do have to build a base for this. It's currently a little bit lower down from the Allosaurus, and this is going to be one of the centerpieces for the new exhibit when we refurbish. So when we renovate the exhibit, we will probably take this down and put the cabinets in around it and things. But the plan is to get this a nice big wooden base with some cabinets around it, and it'll be used to show a new hypothesis on the evolution of these tail spikes and tail clubs that these stegosaurs and other dinosaurs had. So that's a bit of a research project that I'm currently working on. And let them fight. So right now there's no longer sleeping, and there's a bit of a rook going on in the exhibit. So yeah, you can see the stegosaur's a little bit low down, and the sand is pushed out of the way, but we'll get a base on him as soon as this project gets going. We're going to take that fake rock base off the Allosaur and give him a nice new base as well, so he looks really grand. There's also a whole bunch of other new things in the exhibit. This is a little sample of them, so if you take a look, if you've not been in recently, you'll see some new things there as well, like this ankylosaur skull and some nice new models and various other things as well. about a month ago, we were in Minneapolis for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology annual meeting, and museum affiliated researchers. We were in 7 presentations this year. So some of our collaborations from Mexico and from Puerto Rico and in Montana, all sorts of cool research on dinosaurs and the vertebrate fossils, some of which we have at the museum and others at other institutions as well. So yeah, we had a really good showing at that meeting. Basically, it was in Minneapolis, so I thought it was a really good excuse for us to get there and get as many people there as we could, because we could just drive there in a few hours, you know. So on to the field work. So we do field work in a couple of formations. The Hell Creek Formation here in North Dakota and Montana. We don't do too much work there right now, but I keep meaning to go out into there, but I was a bit tired in the fall. But the Judith River Formation is where we do most of our work. It's about 78 million years old, 76 million years old, depending on which bit you're in. And we do field work from June through to early September, depending on what funds we have. And we do work exclusively on public lands. So these fossils basically belong to the people of the United States, and they're looked after at our museum in perpetuity. No one's going to buy these and disappear off to another state. So the Judith River Formation. This is the Judith River from 78 million years ago. It looked a bit like this. You'll see that the center part of the United States was covered by the Western Interior Seaway, so we were actually flooded by the sea. This is the area of Montana where we collect. So the purple you can see is the Judith River Formation, and we actually collect all the way along that top part of the formation. We have a few different spots that we work in. So mostly what we do when we're collecting is we follow up on previous year's sites, but we also look for new sites as well. We walk around on the outcrop and look for new things. So I'm going to be talking about a mixture of old sites and new sites. So the Big Dig, Jack's Bone Bed. I mentioned this last year, and you may well remember this slide. So in 2020, Jack Wilson found this site, and it's a sandstone, a mixed sandstone and mudstone, and there were all sorts of bones sticking out of it. And so we went back in 2021, and we dug in, and we found some really nice bones, and we've been back every year ever since. So we usually start off the field season with a lot of overburden because everyone wants to get into shape. So we do a lot of shoveling and clear off the bone layer that we're going to excavate that year. So here we are clearing some overburden, or rather, here's everybody else cleaning overburden because I'm taking photos. One thing that happened early in the season is the jackhammer was working fine, but the generator made some funny noises. And I noticed that when we were moving all of our equipment out of the garage, there was corn on the ground, and I didn't quite know why. And apparently a mouse had decided it was going to store all of this corn inside the generator. So the generator was spitting out corn for a while at the beginning of the field season. It seemed to be okay, but there's a mouse that doesn't have a winter store of food somewhere in the garage. I hope he stashed it somewhere else. So here we are finally digging into the bone layer. Everybody's got a spot, and basically they very carefully work their way down through those mudstones and sandstones. Although the biggest bones are at the bottom, there's all sorts of great stuff all the way to the top, including leaves. The very top layer is a fine sort of silt layer, and it has lots of leaves in it. So when we find a nice leaf, we collect those for the data and for show. I mean, they're beautiful fossils. Most of what we get, these are some slides from last year, are things like large leg bones from duckbills. And as a consequence, we make some really big jackets. And some of these jackets we actually left last year, and we picked them up this year because we hadn't quite finished them last year. So I'm not going to talk too much about the big duckbills this time at this site. We're going to talk about some of the smaller things that we've been finding. So this is a wonderful specimen that Austin found fairly early in the season, I think. So he's pointing at it, and he's quite excited. But what is it that he's pointing at? Well, he's pointing at this. This has been cleaned up a little bit. This is the skull of a crocodile. So you're looking down onto the palate, and all the little sort of circles that you can see around the outside, those are the tooth sockets. So mostly the teeth have fallen out of this crocodile skull. But what kind of crocodile is it? Well, we could make these comparisons. Um, Initially, I was calling this a brachychampsa. I think I may have posted that online. I know I posted that online. It's not a brachychampsa. That's what we call the short-snouted alligatorid that we get in the Hell Creek, that I'm used to collecting in. But this is in the Judith. This is a little bit older. So if you're down in the Judith, there's a couple of different options, maybe. One is called Alberta champsa. So it has a fairly short face, and this was described in 1972. And then also it's been suggested that there may be some Stangera champsas also in this formation. Although generally speaking, Stangera champsa comes from later in time. It comes about 70 million years ago, whereas Alberta champsa is about 76. So our specimen is from 76 million years ago. So you'd say it's probably Alberta champsa. Now, what's cool about this? There's a few things that are cool about this. One is that these are incredibly rare. Good skulls are really rare. There is only one good skull of Alberta champsa. There's only one good skull of Stangera champsa. So whatever this turns out to be, it's only the second skull known, and it's beautiful. Second of all, our skull's a little bit shorter than Alberta champsa, the specimen here, but our skull's very small. So it does make me wonder whether or not the shortness of the skull is related to growth. That they start off with fairly short skulls and then they get longer through growth. I'm not an alligator expert, but we do see these kinds of things happening in dinosaurs. So I do wonder what impact our specimen may have on those kinds of studies. So after we finish this, the slides, you'll be able to see the latest view of the skull. This is what it looked like a couple of days ago, I think. But it's a pretty little thing. Beautiful little skull. This is a pelvis. I said I wasn't going to show any duckbill bones, but then here's one. This is a huge pelvis that Jason found. It's probably a duckbill, although we do have some ceratopsian bones from the same spot, so maybe it belongs to one of those. But anyway, it's a great big pelvis that Jason was very happy to find. And just as happy to carry it out. So here he is with Jordan carrying that horrible big heavy jacket up to the truck. It's not been cleaned up yet, so we haven't seen it, but it's a nice looking pelvis sacrum. And one of the things that happened at that site is one day the crew came down there. I'm working on the other site, as you'll soon hear, and they moved the tarp, and we've had various animals under the tarp, and if you're lucky, it'll just be a mouse or something, but if you're unlucky, it's a rattlesnake. Anyway, this was a pack rat that decided it was going to spend the night underneath the tarp. And apparently they like shiny things. So he didn't go for any of the foil. But he wouldn't go away. He was very happy just to sit in the quarry, apparently. So the crew thought they would try and lure him away by giving him part of an apple. And that worked about as well as you can imagine. He just sat there and ate the apple and was very happy with it. So they eventually got him to leave. But he was a cute little guy. He was just hopping around the quarry. So these are pack rat. So some of the bones that you can see in the background of that pack rat slide are some of these bones. So this is a spot that Jordan and Francesco were working, and there's all kinds of bones in this picture. You can see some vertebrae. Those are the kind of round dishes. There's like 3 or 4 vertebrae. There's ribs. There's parts of another pelvis in there that Jordan was working really hard on. All sorts of stuff. But most interesting is what's in the bottom right corner. That's this bone. This is the nose horn of a little ceratopsid dinosaur. It's not very big. It's got a kind of smooth texture. And actually, when you look at it, you can't really see in this picture, but when you look at it when it's from the side, you can see it's kind of got flat on one side, which is a bit weird for a horn. But anyway, what species is it? Well, we do know that in this area, we have got a Centrosaurus aperta specimen, but that's from lower down in the rocks. And so if you go a little higher up to where we are, you should be in what's called the Styracosaurus zone. So this is Styracosaurus. It had a more elaborate spiky frill, and it had a large nose horn. So these are some nose horns from a bone bed of Styracosaurus from Canada, from rocks of the same age. I don't know quite how far away these are, but a few hundred miles north of where we work. Now, what's interesting, the bottom left corner, E and F, are the same bone. Now, that's an unfused juvenile nose horn of Styracosaurus. And what's interesting about the nose horns of centrosaurs is they're actually formed from outgrowths from the nose bones, the nasals. So when they're young and the nose bones haven't fused together yet, you basically have half a nose horn on one side and half a nose horn on the other side. Now, I work on Triceratops, and Triceratops, the nose horn, is actually made of a separate bone. So it doesn't form in the same way as the nose horn does in ceratopsids, in centrosaurines, like these guys. So I always really wanted to see one of these unfused nose horns, because I've seen loads of Triceratops nose horns, but I've never actually seen in person an unfused nose horn of a centrosaurine. So now we have one. We haven't cleaned it up yet, but we have one. And so here is ours. In comparison to that Styracosaurus nose horn, you can see it's very similar. It has that sort of, it's not got the deeply woven texture of an adult. It's got kind of almost a velvety kind of texture on the outside. And like I say, if you go and look around it from the side, it's flat on the underside. So this is like half a nose horn. So it's going to be super cool to see this thing when it's cleaned up. In fact, I might open the jacket tomorrow because I'm very impatient. I want to see what it looks like. So that was a special treat for me. I don't get many treats because I'm too busy digging up duckbills, but I work on ceratopsids, so it was really cool to see this. Here's Ace with her find. This is an ornithomimid, one of these ostrich mimics. That's what Amanda works on. A foot claw. So we do get various ornithomimid bones at this site as well. It's starting to paint a quite interesting story as to the things we're finding. So yeah, these slides, I'm going to show you some more small theropod bones that come from the same site. So you might remember, if you've seen last year's talk, and maybe the one before, we've been pulling out these sorts of bones. So these are all small theropod bones that we collected up to 2022, including parts of the skull, which are diagnostic, but also the shoulder, parts of the neck, all sorts of leg bones and things like that. Last year, we got some more bones. We got part of the coracoid, one of the foot bones, and then some more neck vertebrae. Well, this year, those bones are from Troodontid. We can tell by that frontal bone, the one that fits between the eyes, that these belong to a Troodontid, probably Stenonychosaurus. And this is very rare, so this is a super cool thing to find. And we have more of these small, fragile bones coming out. But it's painting a different picture now. So, yeah, we used to have this Troodontid, and if you've been following us, you know we've also got a pterosaur. So when we're finding these bones, we found a really fragile bone, it was probably pterosaur, and if we found a Troodontid, a more robust bone, it might be a Troodontid. But some of these bones don't fall into either of those categories. So on the far left, there's a humerus. Pretty sure this is a humerus, but it's really very big. And the thought now is that it's either from a really big bird or it's possibly from a caenig-gnathed oviraptorid dinosaur. And similarly, that one in the middle that says wing or leg bone, that one's being prepped in the lab right now. It's not been finished yet. This photograph's only a few days old. That's either a leg bone of one of these oviraptorid dinosaurs, or it's a wing bone from a pterosaur. And I started out thinking it was a pterosaur wing bone, but I'm not so sure anymore. The one that says bird foot underneath it, that is a fused up tarso-metatarsus from a large bird, apparently. So that was quite a surprise. And then next to it is a pterosaur wing bone. But interestingly enough about that pterosaur bone was, it was on the other side of the quarry. It's on the side that I was working. I actually found that bone. With the lambeosaur that we have. So there are these fragile raptor and pterosaur bones scattered throughout this site, not just on the one side concentrated in one area. So that's really exciting. And while we used to think we just had a pterosaur and a Troodontid, which is incredible to have those two, we think we've now got something else. And one of the clues to that is that vertebra at the bottom in the middle. I showed this photograph. I posted it online, and Dave Verricchio pulled me aside at SVP. He's an expert in Troodontids from Montana State University, where I did my PhD. And he says, that vertebra has a little hole in the side. It's called a pleurocoel. And Troodon doesn't have pleurocoels like that. So this is not a Troodontid. which means that, and we have a couple of bones like this with a little hole in the side, which means that this is another small raptor-like dinosaur from this site, possibly one of these canicnathid oviraptorid type dinosaurs. Well, there's also a nice little claw there as well from one of these small dinosaurs too. So we've got more than just the Troodonta the pterosaur. We've probably got canicnathid bones from this site, and exciting because they're all through the site over about 20 meters or more, 30 meters. So there's going to be a lot, hopefully, to find in future years. We've got many more of these bones we haven't cleaned up yet. So what else? Well, this is my part of the story, unfortunately. This is Liberty the Lambeosaurus, Jack's Bone Bed, Part 2. So back in 2021, we excavated this, which turned out to be a beautiful skull of Lambeosaurus. And one of the most complete known skulls, this is on the other side of the site from all those bones I just showed you. The only one from the US, and we called it Liberty. Now, it wasn't just a skull. You can see the neck in this photograph as well, but it has a partial skeleton with it too. It's got loads of vertebrae, it's got parts of the pelvis, it's got leg bones, probably all the arms, loads of ribs. It's an absolute jumble of bones. Some of it's articulated. Well, Liberty is now on exhibit, so you can come into the museum and you can see this beautiful skull right there in the display. But our task this year was to collect the rest of the skeleton, or at least try to. We've got a few blocks out already, but there's quite a lot left in the ground. Now, last year we were digging around those bones and we came across skin. And skin is great, fossilized dinosaur skin, because it tells us a lot of new information about the dinosaurs and what they looked like. But it is very difficult to dig because you really don't want to expose the skin. You want to leave it in the rock, at least until you're in the lab. But of course, you don't know you've got it until you've uncovered it. So it just becomes kind of a guessing game. You're digging around the bone and trying to dig in places where there isn't skin. But anyway, this is what the site ended up looking like. Not only is it complicated because of the dinosaur skin, there's a sinkhole, which is it's like a stream that runs through one side of it. And so some of the bones have been sort of shoved down that sinkhole. So Brandon there is actually working on a section of skin and a bunch of ribs and vertebrae that have all jumped down about 6 inches and have been water damaged as well. So that made this site even more of a joy to dig. What you can see in the middle in the jacket, the long bone that's pointing basically straight up in the middle, that's the lower leg. So last year we found the lower leg. The lower leg is all covered in skin. It goes up to the pelvis, but the pelvis has been damaged by this sinkhole. And then there's a whole bunch of articulated ribs. They're all covered in skin as well. So our task was to dig around that section and see if we can basically make a nice jacket that we can pull out. Well, we came across parts of the foot bones. So that's what you can see on the left here. That's part of the foot. And then on the right is a nice piece of skin. There's skin all over the place in this specimen. And sometimes it's around bone and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just there on its own. So it's kind of chaotic in the digging. And we're basically just trying to avoid finding anything at this point. We're just trying to dig around and make a nice jacket that we can get out. So, but there are bones everywhere. So these are a couple of photographs of the site. You can see on the left-hand side, there's crisscrossing ribs. There's some articulated rib cage on the right-hand side of that photograph. And then in the right photograph is a whole bunch of tail bones. So the tail should be sticking into the cliff, but it's kind of fallen apart and has washed into the leg area. So we've got legs with skin, we've got patches of skin that don't seem to be connected to any bones, and then lying on top of all that is a whole bunch of vertebrae. So it's a very complicated site to dig. So we isolated what we could of the skeleton. So I'm standing in the sinkhole here, and we've lifted off one part of one end, and we're busy making a big jacket, which is basically all skin. It's the back end of the animal with the leg and the foot. And that's what it looks like just at the end of the summer. We top jacketed it for the winter, and we'll be pulling this out next year. Meanwhile, we took some of the skin samples that we collected and showed them to Dr. Clint Boyd. He was also at the SVP meeting in Minneapolis, and him and his team all went. And they have a X-ray diffraction handheld scanner they were using to look at the chemical preservation of the skin. So we showed him a few different bits of fossil skin that we had to see what he could tell. So overall, Jack's Bone Bed is an incredible site, and it's got so many fantastic fossils in it. Okay, another new site, or rather here's a new site for this year, Cobb the Nodosaur. So back in 2020, Jack Wilson found this site. Now this is, it doesn't look like much. It's just a ledge and there's some bits of bone sticking out. You can see those yellow arrows are pointing to 3 bits of bone. But it was quite cool. There was part of a rib. There was a nice osteoderm from an ankylosaur. And then there was a big flat bone, which is the top one that is in these slides. It had texture on it, so we thought maybe it was a ceratopsian frill, but it was quite badly weathered. So we weren't quite sure what it was. But this year, we decided we'd go and dig this site. So we did. So this is the excavation that Steve and Bobby were leading. And what did they find? Well, that big flat bone turned out to be part of a nodosaur pelvis. It was one of these big flat ilia, one of the bones that the hips basically. So what you're looking at here is there's sort of a long stem of bone at the bottom. You can see that in it's upside down text there. Because I had to turn it upside down to be the right way around. And then there's some sort of side ribs, those are called sacral ribs, and that's part of the pelvis, the fused pelvis. And then to the left, you can't really see it in this picture, but there's actually a fused ilium fused onto that pelvis. So there's most of the pelvis there, and then there's also part of a leg jammed underneath. So it's looking really promising, this site. We haven't finished it at all. I'm hoping that there'll be a skull or something in there, but who knows? But maybe there's only the back end of the animal, but it might have a nice tail covered in spikes. We don't know yet. But it's a nodosaur, so this is what we have. Not too much, but it actually has some really interesting features. This should be, it's not one of the armored dinosaurs that has a tail club. This one doesn't have a tail club, but it is covered in spikes. And has a kind of flat head, a bit like a football helmet. So it should be either an Edmontonia or a Panoplosaurus. But what's interesting is there are no named nodosaurs, I don't think, from the Middle Dinosaur Park Formation. I think most of these are from slightly higher in section. So it should be something of interest. If you don't have a skull and some of the bones around the front of the animal, it's not as much you can do with figuring out what species they are. But even so, it's a rare specimen, so we're quite excited to have it. Bobby's especially excited because he loves ankylosaurs. So he was dead pleased to clean that up, to find that. So that pelvis, we jacketed it and pulled it down the hill, and then we did the old trick of putting it on a hood of a car that Carey, who was working nearby, loaned us his hood sled, and then we pulled it over to the truck. So we'll be going back to this site in 2025 and hopefully digging up some more of this big armored nodosaur. We had some fun times in camp this year. This is a supercell that threatened to bomb us with quarter-sized or big hailstones, and so we sort of improvised by putting kneeling pads and all sorts of cardboard and stuff over some of the vehicles. Turns out this was just like a big flop. We didn't get hail. It was pretty nasty for a bit, but the weather wasn't nearly as bad as it was supposed to be. But when you see that coming towards you on the horizon, you start to worry a little bit. And it got very foggy at times as well, which was very weird. It felt like the middle of winter. And the other camp, when Steve was running a different camp for a few weeks on his own, he told us that apparently a funnel cloud came down and grabbed hold of our crew tent and shook it around and bent all the poles. It's a shame because this was our new crew tent, but apparently the canvas wasn't too damaged. Just has one little tear in the front that you can just see in this picture Otherwise, the canvas is fine. However, we did have to buy a whole bunch of new poles. Um, I'm kind of making light of it. Apparently, it was a very scary moment, but it's not. That's tornadoes for you. So one of the things we do, we prospect for new sites as well. So here's Austin with a big femur of a hadrosaur sticking out the cliff. Here's Austin again. So you can see on the right-hand side, there's like a little worn-down layer. That's a path that we used to walk down every day. And you go back to the same places, and sometimes you find new things that have just started to weather out. So we were wandering around this area, and we came across this. So these are some little bits of bone sticking out. So I started to dig around them a little bit and see what we could find. And this is what we found. So this is called turtle time. This is most of a turtle shell. I'll show you a little bit. I've got an overlay. This is what you're looking at. So it's most of a turtle shell. The pieces missing at the top have mostly fallen apart. We can probably glue them on. What's cool about this is if you look very closely at the shell, you can see all these little pimples. And what that tells us is the species of turtle that it belongs to. And this is called a docus, which is actually one of the more rare turtles in the Judith River. And to find a piece of a docus is quite rare. But to find a whole shell is pretty important. I have some colleagues down in Arizona who work on turtles, and they'd gone through our collections looking for bits of a docus. And so I was dead pleased to be able to send them a message saying we found a whole one. This has actually got part of an arm with it as well, I think. There's some little leg bones just in the top left of this picture. They might belong to the turtle or they might not. We don't know. We didn't excavate. We've dug around, but we didn't clean them up. So we don't really know what's there until we actually get it into the lab. But I'm really looking forward to seeing this one cleaned up. So an Odocus, that's pretty cool. Oh, here's the mandatory Tyrannosaur tooth slide. So we get lots of Tyrannosaur teeth as we dig through these layers. So this isn't even all of them. We have many of them that we collect. The one on the far right gets special mention because Tom found that and he was really pleased with it. It has a lovely little wear facet on the top. Josephine came across this and then put it down because she didn't think it was important, but I mentioned her, so she has to put up with that. So this is quite cool. This is a neural spine of a duckbill. And what's cool about it is it's got tooth marks. So all these lines that you can see on one side, those are tooth marks made probably by a tyrannosaur, biting into the spine and dragging its teeth along. Now, there's no evidence of healing, so this bite probably happened when the animal was dead. So it's probably not necessarily scavenging, but at least it didn't survive those bites. Another thing that's cool about this spine is that if you look in the right-hand picture, you can see it's twisted. It's like an S shape, and it shouldn't be. It should be ramrod straight. So this is a pathology. This is an injured neural spine of a hadrosaur. Now, we actually have a specimen from about 200 yards away from this spine, which has extensive injuries like this to its vertebrae. So I think that this specimen was probably picked up by a hunter or something at that site many years ago. They carried it for a bit and then they dropped it because it looks exactly like some of the spines that we have from that other specimen. But I can't know for sure. But it is super cool anyway. So it's not only is it tooth marked, it's pathological as well. So that's from a duckbill. It's a spine from the middle of the back of a duckbill. Here's another duckbill bone. This one's a leg bone. Now, we found this in 2023, but I actually forgotten that we'd found it until I started going through some of the, emptying some of the bags of the things that we'd found and came across it, and it's absolutely covered in these tiny tooth marks. So these could be either by little baby tyrannosaurs, or some people have suggested recently that maybe these are raptor tooth marks. But this is about the most tooth-marked bone I've ever seen. And there's more of it. This is only half the bone. There's another part that fits on the end. So I have to go back to this site and find more pieces of it because it had been washed out and shattered, but we've been gluing it together. And the tooth marks are absolutely spectacular. Also, this year, in 2017, we found this site. And I always take people to this every year. All our new people, I do a little tour of our old sites and cool things to see. This one's called Den Duck. And what you can see in this block is a bunch of articulated tail bones, all these white bits and chunks. It's an articulated tail of a duckbill. Now, I'd taken my crew there, and oops, there we go. And I was saying, look up at there, like all these tailbones, and then there's these other blocks nearby, and they contain more bones. So this is like an articulated duckbill skeleton that's been broken up into pieces. It's not really collectible because it's in these massive boulders and it's also shattered to pieces, so it's not great either. But I was picking up some of these pieces to show them, and I come across this. This is a piece of fossilized skin. And I was like, more skin. But this is quite a breathtaking piece because it's just incredible. This is what it looks like close up. You can see all the scales. You can see their different sizes. They form little rosettes. So we also looked around and we found a couple more pieces. So this is a piece of skin. The yellow arrow is pointing directly at this other skin patch, but this has got like a porous texture. This is one of the pieces that Clint looked at SVP with his XRD scanner, and it's got some interesting chemical preservation as well. So quite an unusual specimen and site. Not sure what to do with it really, because it's massive blocks and it's very difficult to see where the skin is coming from. There's some pieces in loose blocks, but evidently when the sandstone is broken at just the right place, you've got that beautiful skin preserved. So I suspect there will be parts of these blocks that have more of that skin. We just got to figure out what we're going to do, because those blocks are not only very big and heavy, they're also extremely hard rock. So maybe we can't do any better than just searching amongst all the rubble and trying to find more pieces. But that's one we'll talk about it with the BLM and see what they think. I'm not quite sure what to do myself yet, but it was cool to find that skin because it was quite incredible. Here's another site. In 2023, the end of 2023, we were at a presentation here in Dickinson. TC Energy were presenting about one of the hydrogen plants they were going to build. And their representative, Taylor, said, we knew Taylor from a previous project, my brother found a tyrannosaur jaw. And I was like, really? Because, people tell you to find all sorts of things and they often turn out to be something else. But she showed us the photograph and there it is, tyrannosaur jaw. So we went and visited the site. It was very close to where we actually do our field work. Hunter took us to the site and called it Hunter's Tyranno. So what you're looking at is the front part of the maxilla, the upper jaw of a very large Daspletosaurus. We know this is Daspletosaurus because of some of the texture and the shape of that jaw. So Hunter took us to the site and we took a look, and it's at the bottom of a very thick sandstone that's a lag. We got a lot of these lags. So it'd be a great deal of effort to excavate, and there was no sign of any more of it sticking out. Hunter did find this lovely duckbill foot claw at the site, so there is bone coming out, but there's bone coming out all over the place. Still, it's a quite incredible thing to find, so here it is. Just yesterday I took these photographs, so it's in our collections now. This is from the Bureau of Reclamation land. So it's a different permit that we work with those federal land management companies as well. Agencies, I should say. So this is the part of the jaw. It was sticking out, the back end was sticking out, so unfortunately the rest of the jaw that would probably originally been there has long since been destroyed by weathering. But you can see there are teeth in the jaw. All of the sockets have replacement teeth, and there's even that really big tooth sticking out. So it's a really nice piece to be able to show people. And Hunter's supposed to come here at some point and clean it up a bit and make a mold and cast of the tooth so he can take some of these parts, casts of some of these parts home with him. So, and that's how these things should really work out. Members of the public who find things, if they report them to museums, who can then go and collect them and put them in a federal museum for everyone to see, that's really the way these things should work. So it was a really good experience for everybody, I think. I just wish there was more of the skull there, but you never know. Maybe we'll check it every year and see. But there's a lot of rock to remove if that is the case. Not everything is huge, though. I've got a few more things to show you, and then we can go to the live section. So this is some tiny fossils. This is a little vertebra that I came across in one of our macro sites. I thought, looks a bit different from a typical vertebra. So I asked a few people online. And this is, on the left-hand side, this is a Paleosaniwa vertebra. This is a huge Komodo dragon-like lizard. I actually think it was more closely related to the Gila monster because it had little osteoderms or something. But this would be up to about 6 feet long. So not only are there dinosaurs in these rocks where we're collecting, but there are lizards too, and some of them are really big meat-eating lizards. I mean, I bet this Paleosaniwa, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, it probably ate baby dinosaurs and things like that. And then on the right-hand side is something we found this year. It's a little tiny lizard jaw with teeth in it. So all the teeth there, it's a beautiful little thing. So we'll get that cleaned up and we'll be able to look at it and see what kind of lizard it belongs to. Last site I'm going to talk about is an update on Jack's Tyranno. So I talked a little bit about this last year, but in 2017 we found the tip of a snout of a tyrannosaur on the ground. Jack Wilson found this site, and it was surrounded by all sorts of fragments. We could tell it was a tyrannosaur, but it was pretty smashed up and sad looking. So it became a site that we collected the better tyrannosaurs before this one. But some of those pieces went together and they gave us more skull bones. So this is a lacrimal. This is the bone that's over the eye, which is apparently very important for telling the species of tyrannosaurs and how they evolve. So once we'd finished some of our other tyrannosaur sites, we actually went back to this site last year and the year before, and we found some more parts of the skull. So we found the postorbital behind the eye, and then last year we found the nose bones and some of the jaws. So we went back this year to see if there was more bones to be found at the site. Well, digging the overburden took a bit longer than we expected, so we didn't get to dig the whole layer out. But we did find this fabulous tooth with a root, and we found this little jaw of a crocodile. So he even has teeth in it. So this is what that crocodile jaw looks like when it's clean. One thing to note about this is it has a notch, so you can see the tooth sockets. In the right-hand side, you're looking up into the roof of the mouth. You can see tooth sockets. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them there on the right, and then there's a little gap, a notch. And that's key for figuring out what kind of crocodile it is. Because if we look at these crocodiles that we should have in this area, Stangera champsa or Alberta champsa is there on the left, and you'll notice between the maxilla and the premaxilla, there's no notch. There's just a continuous sort of tooth row. Whereas in Leidiasuchus on the right, there's actually a notch where they're missing, they don't have any teeth. So that tells us that this part of the jaw is from a Leidiasuchus. So that's quite cool. Here's that tooth of the tyrannosaur that was collected, and there it is all cleaned up. So Steve cleaned that up, and that undoubtedly goes with the skull. So Danny is also, this summer, Danny, our intern, has also been finding new clicks on all the fragments of skull that we found in previous years. So we've been able to reconstruct the skull a little bit better. So this is currently what Holga is the name of this one, currently what the Holga skull looks like. It's still fragmentary, but we're hoping that we'll find more of these complete bones. But we've actually got some of the best bones you can get. The ones around the eye are really important, and we're actually not missing all that much from the upper part of the skull at least. So pretty hopeful we can find some more clicks and get more of this fit together and have a second new Tyrannosaur skull here on display at the museum. And in fact, I just got a grant to be able to reconstruct this one too. So maybe in about a year's time, I'll be talking to you about getting this one on display, just like we just got the B2. So I always like to end the talk with some pictures of some of the animals that we saw. So on top left, there's a wolf spider with all her babies riding on her back, looking slightly terrifying. There weren't as many toads this year as there were in previous years, but we had lots of toads nonetheless. And in the bottom right is Mr. Cheese, a cat who adopted us for a few weeks, and he really liked cheese. Just a few more slides to go, and then we'll go to the live section. If you are living locally and you want to become a museum member, you can come in as much as you like. We have quite a lot of people bring their kids in and they play on the interactives and they go in the kids area quite a lot. So please think about becoming a museum member. Again, we have space for volunteers. So if you want to clean up dinosaur bones, email me or email Steve. Come into the lab and learn how to clean up dinosaur bones, because we have some fantastic things that need some attention. And if you want to do fieldwork with us, we also take volunteers for the fieldwork program. So email me or look up on the website and you'll find the forms for application for the field program. Also, please consider donating. We're going to be doing some big things in the next year in our exhibit and in the building. And this place is going to look totally different and totally awesome. And we'll be giving these world-class fossils the building they deserve and the exhibit they deserve. So lots of new things to come. Oh, and tomorrow is the Christmas open house. So come in and see the Christmas displays that we have in the regional museum next door and some art by Trinity students. And we'll also be having some of these fossils. We'll open the window and we'll show you some of the things that we've been cleaning up and finding. And just got to say thank you to all the people who've donated, given support, donated their time, people who prepared fossils for us, and of course our field crew, who are all very hardworking. Best field crew I ever had this year. Really great people. And I hope to see many of you again next year. So we will now be moving over to our live camera, which is vertical this year, apparently. And I'll see you in a minute.
All right. So welcome to the lab here at Badlands Dinosaur Museum. I hope you enjoyed the slide presentation. I'm going to talk about equipment a little bit today. We got some cool fossils to show you, and then we're going to migrate you into collections as well. I'm Steve Glosson. I'm the Paleo Lab Manager. And oh boy, do we have some cool things. So before I launch into some of the scopes we got this year, let's look at this as sort of a teaser. So Liz is our duckbill expert, professor at DSU. She loves duckbills and all things ornithischian. This is a subadult dentary of Brachylophosaurus, is that right?
Yep.
Yep, that's right. So this was cleaned recently by a volunteer who came to us from the Tate Museum, Brian Alvazian. He did a wonderful job. He used our new air abrasion system and a number of our air scribes, top quality advanced air scribes, to work on this. So Denver touched on equipment. What you're looking at here is one of our newer, older scopes. So we acquired this recently. This is a surgical scope from maybe the mid-late 80s, but these are the gold standard for fossil preparation. So these are Heerbrugg, you might see Leica, you might see Wild. The Wild line is very modular. That's what's important to us. All of these pieces are interchangeable among other scopes. So we have what we call a C-tube here. When I'm training volunteers, I can take this eyepiece off, I can put a camera on, and I run that to a monitor, and they can see me working under the scope. And that's made things quite a bit easier. I can also look through the top of the scope to see what they're doing, which is pretty cool. But I can take that C-tube, I can put that on other scopes as well. So these are M7s and M3s. They do roughly 40x mag. And what that means is we can work on dinosaur bones with them, but not necessarily like the really, really, really fine detail specimens. So I'll direct your attention to the station back here. This is what we used our BLM grant this year for. This is a Leica M8 scope. This does up to 50x magnification. This gives us enough magnification to work on things like fossil fish, leaves from Jack's bone bed, any sort of insects or really, really fragile things that we find. So I just have some trainer fish on display right here. These are Priscacara from the Green River Formation. I use the tail fins to train people in manual dexterity to see what skills they might have, where they might lack, where they need a little instruction on. And once again, I can use that C-scope, so I can use monitors to train them and things like that. Right next to it, I guess we're just going to specimen here. Liz can talk about this a little bit. This is Procerolophus, right?
Probably. So this is a... You know that. All right. This is a maxilla. This is an upper jaw from a duck-billed dinosaur. And this is from the same bone bed quarry as the lambeosaur. So initially we thought, maybe all the duckbills in there are lambeosaurs. But it turns out this is really large. You can kind of see the size of my arm compared to it. This is much, much larger than the jaw in the Lambeosaurus. They have relatively small jaws. This is a big animal, and here where the cheekbone attaches, we can tell by the shape of that it's not one of the Lambeosaur type duckbills. It's in the group of them that didn't really have much of a crest on the top of its head. They're a little more boring looking, but I still like them. So it's related to maybe Griposaurus or Procerolophus. So there's a good chance this is going to be Procerolophus. And what's really exciting about it is that we have lots of other leg bones that we found very close by this. And so we've been wondering what species all of those legs belonged to. And so if this jaw belongs to the same animal as those legs, then we know it's a Procerolophus. So we need people to come in and clean those leg bones for us, and then we will have hopefully a pretty good skeleton of this.
And while I'm here, I'll just bring the camera close to this little fish right here. This is a Priscacara. Newer volunteer Kate joined us maybe about 6 months ago. She's been doing a wonderful job prepping this fish. So I started her on the back fin as just a little test, and she decided, hey, I want to keep going and prep this fully. And I'm hoping this will be a beautiful fish that we can put in our gallery when it's done. On the side of equipment, so I talked about scopes. There's another nice scope above our air abrasion setup. We're very lucky. We have a Swan Blaster here. This is as good as you can get, as high quality as you can get for a very fine air abrasion system. And today, I was using that to work on Austin's croc. And so I took Austin's croc out for everybody to see. If maybe Denver wants to come over and hold that and say something about it.
I don't really know very much about crocodiles, but I just think that this thing looks like a modern crocodile skull that someone painted brown. It's absolutely gorgeous.
It's extremely flat as well. We thought it might be a little more three-dimensional, but it's very, very flat.
Yeah, it has one little button tooth left. All the other teeth fell out, although there was one nearby with a root, so we'll find where that is in the collection.
So why are they shaped like that, the teeth?
Well, the teeth are rounded because they're for crushing turtles, you think.
Yeah, if you've ever watched some YouTube videos of alligators in Florida eating turtles, they can really crack through a turtle shell pretty impressively. So this sort of short, stubby little tooth in a crocodile, we call them molariform teeth because they look a lot like our molars for crushing things. So this tells us that this little guy ate hard-shelled things, maybe clams, maybe small turtles. They'll eat anything they can get their mouth around. He's just absolutely adorable. All the little sutures in the skull, you can see exactly how all the bones fit together. And we should probably take him to the hospital and get him a CT scan, look at his brain as well.
Yeah. I was going to come around here just to show you one more thing. I'll let you hold that. So I'm really excited about this. This is called a Stone Urban microscope. So this was donated by a really good friend of the museum recently. I've been struggling with ways to prepare this block while lying down under magnification. This scope moves in all sorts of directions. It's very hard to find things that do that. So I can be laying down sort of at any angle and get at these bones. This is sort of stage one in scope upgrades that I really wanted for this block. Did we talk about the block?
No, we haven't talked about the block. I didn't say anything about some of our tyrannosaurs really, just because I talked about them a lot last year. But this is the Denver's Tyranno block. It's Steve is working on, and you can see we're making progress, or rather, Steve is making progress. The rock is incredibly hard, but we are getting into the skeleton. So you can see this is the tail, the tip of the tail, and then ribs, And then there's actually, the neck is coming here and then plunges down here. And then there's what we call back ribs, dorsal ribs. And then in the distance there, you can see those are backbones from the middle of the back or the beginning of the back. So if this thing has a head, it'll be right under that rock down there. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be really deep. But that's what we're doing. We're working our way around the bones that we can see and then working down where it's possible to work down with the hope that we'll find the head. But either way, this thing's got lots of ribs. It certainly has lots of ribs. These are the neck ribs, these little fine ones that you can see.
And I know we talked about it last year, but I want to reiterate, we have some of the finest air scribes here. I think we have a really good relationship with Zoic Paleotech in the UK. This is the Zoic Velour. This is a precision tool that Dion and I, in particular, have been using on these very fragile bones. These are two of the bones that would have come up in the presentation. This is is it a pterosaur? Is it an ornithischian? But whatever it is, it's very, very fragile. So we prep these at ultra high magnification, 40x plus, using this really fine adjustable tool.
Yeah, I haven't seen this bone as clean as this. Deanna's just been working on it literally later on today when I was finishing off the talk. I'm pretty sure that is Oviraptorid, or Cainignathed, I should say. And the bone that's above it, I actually didn't mention in the talk, but that's a baby hadrosaur bone. Can't really see in this, but if you follow us online, you'll see there's a post about it. It has very fine grain texture on the surface. But this larger bone, it's more three-dimensional. I only ever saw one side or the other, you see, because in the field we could see this side. And so it looked fairly flat and crushed like a pterosaur. And then when the other side was prepped, it also looked kind of flat and crushed like a pterosaur. But it's not all that crushed. So I think that's probably a Cainignathed leg bone, which is pretty cool. But it does mean we've got another kind of
should touch
raptor.
On an active puzzling project here. So this is the lacrimal from Holger, who you just heard about. I've been digging up Holger for a few years now, and these are some of the pieces that were surface collected initially. A number of people, including Danny Barrera, have come through and found clicks on these. It's just quite an exercise in three-dimensional puzzling. And there are some fits that we can't glue yet because you might lock out pieces that we either surface collect next year or still have in the collections drawers. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this piece.
One of the cool things about that lacrimal, I don't know if we've shown it before, but you can really see how hollow they are. I mean, usually when you find a nice bone, like a lacrimal, it's like you don't want to break into it, but you can see with this one just how much airspace there was inside these skull bones. It's makes them harder to stick together.
And everyone's brains work differently. This is why we need more volunteers. I need as many people as we can get, because I find that just the most random sort of person that you find, they'll find a new fit. I had my mom on this, for example, and she found a fit, and it's like, where'd that come from? Like, a dozen paleontologists have looked at this, and we're still finding new things. You can always contribute something in a fossil prep lab. So I am waiting.
Do we want to go into collections?
Sure.
Or do you want to look at that over there? This? Nope. Okay.
Oh, well.
Hang on. We'll go over here and look at this, since we're in the lab.
Okay, since we're so I pulled this out to work on. It's a little puzzle project that I've been poking at a bit.
Can you rotate it?
Rotate.
The box, so I can see it there.
Okay. So this is probably an arm bone from a duck-billed dinosaur, maybe a radius, and obviously it's in a lot of pieces. You found this, Denver?
I think everyone saw this, and then because it was
Oh,
shattered.
it was a group effort. But what's really cool about this arm bone is that it's absolutely covered with bite marks.
Yeah, I showed this in the presentation.
Right. So this is the bite marks one, and the bite marks continue all down the length of it. And so there's more pieces here that we're still puzzling together to try and connect the rest of the bite marks. So just while Denver was talking during that PowerPoint, I found 2 more clicks.
Did you?
Yep.
Were they good clicks?
One of them was, like, I got these 2 pieces together.
That is a good click.
Yeah.
How did I miss that before?
Yep. So it's one of those things, just a fresh pair of eyes keeps finding fresh connections. So we'll keep working on that project.
Let's go see Amanda's domain. Said slow connection, I think.
All right.
What do you got for us, Amanda?
So I wanted to start off with Hunter's Torino. This is something that Denver was talking about earlier in the live stream. This was found by the younger brother of one of our donors from TC Energy. And so he got in contact and took the crew out to where he had found this. This is a very nice piece of maxilla. This is part of the upper jaw of a tyrannosaur. And it's even got a couple of the teeth still embedded. So this would have been the inside direction. This would have been the outside of the mouth area here. You can see some of the foramina up close. But this is a big maxilla. This is a big chunk of a tyrannosaur jaw here. And I don't think, unfortunately, there wasn't anything else, right?
No, there wasn't anything obvious coming out of that site. I mean, there's bone from that layer, but sadly, as you can see from the broken edge, is that was the bit that was sticking out of the cliff, the broken edge. So I'll bet you there was a whole maxilla there at one point, but it was eaten by weathering. Here's some more of these nice bones from Jack's bone bed.
Yeah. So to compare in size to that little croc skull that we got to see a little bit earlier, this is a brain case to a much bigger croc. And so this is only the brain case. It's got a little bit of texture of the top of the skull here. But we want people to come in and take a look at these and identify them as well. So this one I will probably scan. I've already scanned one of our croc brain cases just to see if we could get an ID on it. But we're starting to collect quite a few crocs.
This is a humerus.
We could get more light on that.
Yeah. This is the humerus I was talking about. This one is quite flat. It's
So we think this belongs to a bird.
it's bird or oviraptorid, I think. Here's that tarso-metatarsus that does belong to a bird. I know they look very fragile. Of course, they are very fragile if you're not careful with them. But the bone preservation of this site is really very nice. And the bones are very sturdy. Even these fragile, well, even these little ones. This is quite cool. I didn't show this in the talk. I was thinking about doing, but I didn't really have a space for it. Slow connection again. Great. This is a hand claw from an ornithomimid.
It's a very, very long hand claw. So that would belong to a quite large ornithomimid.
It's not all that big of a... Well, I suppose it's missing quite a bit at the back. That's about the full length. Yeah, it's quite cool.
Show the strange skull piece.
Oh, here's the strange skull piece that no one really... It's
So-
skull.
I have scanned this as well, and this is another thing that we would be able to throw out there and say, hey, have you seen something like this? It's full of holes, and some of them look very pathological, and others are incredibly smooth on the texture inside and out. So this we've kind of shown to everyone who's come through, but we still don't know what we're looking at. And if you flip over to the other side, it's got this sort of gouge in here, but the internal texture in there is very, very smooth. We're just trying to figure out, like, could these be nerves, or is this entirely pathological, or what would cause those holes to be so smooth on the inside?
This is a neck bone from the troodontid. So it's slightly smushed. It's been squashed in the rock, of course. We didn't do that. But that's a little neck bone. So we have 3 of these now.
Got the wing bone from the pterosaur.
Oh, yeah.
This one is very, very thin. This is pencil thin. I think we might actually just keep that.
Yeah, we'll keep it on there. I mean, it is possible to pick it up, but it's extremely thin.
Yeah, so this would have been one of the finger bones in the wing.
So do we have any comments or questions?
Let's see.
Not yet. Okay.
Amanda Perry asks, could they be from burrowing insects? They probably would not make holes. I'm guessing this is for the what we think might be the skull piece. We don't think that a burrowing insect would make a hole so smooth. That's probably a biological feature that either was naturally formed or formed from some sort of pathology going through the skull. So it probably happened during life rather than afterwards. What else do we have? Yeah, for the weird skull piece. Do we have any other questions? What is an ornithomimid? An ornithomimid is a dinosaur that looks quite like an ostrich. It doesn't have a beak.
On the other side, there's the 3D print.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, so this is a reconstruction of an ornithomimid skull. They have these very large eyes here. They still have a maxilla rather than a keratinous beak, but this would have been life size here. This is the correct size for Ornithomimus. And yeah, they resemble an ostrich. They were probably long distance runners, and they probably ate an omnivorous diet, but we're still doing research into that. But they had those very long hand claws. And one of the ways to tell Struthiomimus versus Ornithomimus apart is the difference in their finger claws and in their fingers. So, yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions? Let's see.
Here's that little jaw down here.
Oh, yeah.
This is the other crocodile jaw. Let's move away from the screen, that'll be weird. So this is the one with the little notch at the tip. So this is a Lydiasuchus. And we do actually have more of that specimen, but it's very spread out. Everything from that Holger site is very spread out and broken up. What else do we have? Yeah, we looked at that.
I showed Hunter's Turner. We also have this little piece of maxilla that you found. So this is from a microsite called Wraparound Micro, and this is a very small piece of an upper tyrannosaur jaw. Now, the tooth has been crushed in there, but it is still in place. So this tooth wouldn't have erupted yet. It was probably going to replace another tooth in the jaw, but there it is, just kind of preserved in place.
So this is a piece of a tyrannosaur jaw. So, yeah, it's another maxilla from a large Daspletosaurus.
Yeah.
We have another question. So Cass asks, could you talk about how the CT scan of Liberty's skull went?
Well, I don't know how the CT scan of Liberty's skull went because we haven't seen the CT scans yet.
The hospital is still processing the data for us, yes.
Yeah.
But I was in the room with everyone.
It was a tight fit.
It was a tight fit. We kept having to cut the archival cradle down just to make it fit in the CT scanner. But I watched as it passed through, and there was some really cool stuff showing up. So I think we're going to be able to reconstruct resonating chamber and some other things. It's a huge packet of data, and they're still processing.
Any more questions out there? Not yet.
Not that I can see yet.
Well, do we have anything else, or are we gonna log off?
Are all of the fossils you found from the Dinosaur Park formation?
No. So, the name of these formations is a big question, and the problem is that, well, it doesn't really matter the name of the formation anyway, but we work in two different areas principally, and so one area near Hava has part of the exposure is Dinosaur Park Formation, and the other part of the exposure is you would either call it Judith River or you would call it Old Man Formation. Now, if you're over in the Hinsdale area where we collected all the tyrannosaurs that we've got, or the big ones at least, that would all be called either Judith River or Old Man. Probably Judith River. It's not actually all that complicated, I don't think. It's just that it's confusing more than it's complicated, the terms to use. And one of the nice things about the dinosaurs that we're finding is that the dinosaurs that we're finding are actually telling us about the age of the rocks. That previously we were just looking at rocks and comparing them to other rocks and trying to correlate them based on the rock type. And that's not been all that helpful. So we've had not very good correlations across what we would call the Judith River Formation, going all the way from southern Montana and even into Wyoming, all the way north into Canada. The rocks alone are not really great for correlating. However, we can use what we call sequence stratigraphy, which is where we use changes in sea level to tell us the relative ages of the rock. So when sea level is very high, it's very high everywhere. So if you see evidence of high sea level, you can link up those levels in the rock. But that can sometimes be difficult to tell in these rocks, and it's a relatively new technique that has not really been performed on these rocks. However, the dinosaurs that we have are the same species as the ones we get in Canada, and we know that you get different dinosaurs at different levels. So we know we've got Centrosaurus apertus, and we know we have Lambeosaurus lambii, and we know we have a Daspletosaurus wilsoni. And so the more of these diagnostic species that we find, we can link them up with the Canadian sections and tell us where we are in time, and that helps us to understand the rocks better. It's kind of like you make one step forward on one side, and then you make another step forward on the stratigraphy side, and that helps you with the other side again. So you're kind of constantly moving forward. These data complement each other. That sounds complicated as well, but it's not. But I think we really need to be looking at the dinosaurs and the vertebrate biostratigraphy in more detail, because there's a lot of very high resolution information there. Don't want to bore you too much about stratigraphy.
One more question. Do you plan on exploring other geologic units, or do you have too much work where you're currently at?
We have lots of work where we're currently at. We really need to get more of these fossils cleaned up. We have a lot of big bones from the bone beds. I haven't talked about some of the sites that we've dug this year in the presentation, just because I saved it for next year, the Hadrosaur bone bed and things like that. But we have a lot of bones, so we're not short of things to dig up. But I do want to find some new things, and we will go to the Hell Creek probably in the spring and look and see if we can find something there. The question with the Hell Creek for me is more, if we find something, will it be something new? One of the things about all the specimens that we've been showing you, and most of the things that we're digging up, is that they're all new in one way or another. They're either extending the range of known species down into the United States when they were previously only known in Canada, or they're helping us link up rocks, or they're just fabulous new specimens like the little crocodile that's going to tell us new things as well. If I'm in the Hell Creek, it's been more intensively collected over the years, and it's harder to find something new. With that said, we have a new dinosaur from the Hell Creek coming out fairly soon that I found in 2019. There's a little plug. But it's harder, I think, to find new things there.
Any other questions before we log off? Anything else you want to see?
I think we'll do some more live videos. I know I say this every year, but we'll do some more. I like the unboxing one. We just have to get the resolution of the stream sorted out. But,
Right.
yeah.
And anyone in Dickinson, come on to the museum tomorrow afternoon, 3 to 6, I believe.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we're open till
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, the museum has its annual Christmas open house, so come on over and see what's new on both sides of the museum. We have history as well. It's not just dinosaurs.
We have a few people who are interested in volunteering with us, and they're going to use that time tomorrow to come through, and we'll probably give them a bit of a tour backstage. So if you are also interested in volunteering, that is a great opportunity to do so. So we can show you everything we got going on back here, and I don't think we've done much of a zoom in, but if we wanted to do a quick sweep of how many jackets and how many projects we have back there, it's
you'll make Bob sad.
it is infinite work.
And I'd just like to say that this is only the most exciting stuff. The boring jackets we put in the garage. So
No, they're just the big jacket. That's where the pelvis is.
big
where all
big
the
and
skin
boring.
is.
So there's a lot of other things in other storage nooks and crannies that we have, but these are the most exciting, delicate, fragile, rare. It's a lot of exciting things left to prep. So plenty of work to do.
And I'll reiterate, so if you're from Dickinson or the area, please send me a message. You can find my email on the website, send Denver a message. We are looking for as many volunteers as we can. Everybody has a skill that we can use, but we're not just looking for locals. I have a number of volunteers who are veteran volunteer preparators from other labs who want to spend 2 weeks a month, their spring, with us preparing fossils. So if you've been preparing fossils a year or more somewhere else, get in contact with me, and maybe we can figure out a way to get you here so you can practice on things you might not have worked with before. Anybody else?
Yep. Always looking for more volunteers.
Absolutely.
Always.
All right.
Well, that's it. Yeah, we'll log off. Thanks for tuning in. I know more people see this on the local network TV channel, so hello to you if you do. But yeah, come by and see the museum. We've always got new things, especially in the lab, but we've been putting new things on display all year, and we'd love to show them to you. So thanks for watching, and good night.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Wave goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
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 Thank you.